The dim lights of the ancient archive facility flickered as Admiral Reed walked through the dusty corridors. His footsteps echoed against the metal floors, breaking the silence that had lasted for thousands of years. The archive belonged to the Builders, a species that had vanished long ago, leaving behind only their knowledge and their mysteries. Reed's thin fingers traced along the rows of data crystals, each one containing information that could change the course of history. He had spent 20 years studying the Builders' language, and now he was one of the few beings in the galaxy who could read their writings directly. A soft blue glow caught his attention. In a forgotten corner, behind layers of dust, sat a crystal that seemed different from the others. Its surface was marked with warning symbols, the kind the Builders used for their most dangerous secrets. Reed's heart beat faster as he carefully removed the crystal from its resting place. The holographic display came to life, filling the air with strange diagrams and complex equations. Reed's eyes widened as he realized what he was seeing. The Builders had created a weapon, one that could tear holes in the fabric of space itself. The plans showed how it would work. By creating controlled rifts between dimensions, it could remove entire fleets from existence. But as Reed read further, his excitement turned to fear. The Builders had never used the weapon. Their notes spoke of terrible accidents during testing. Some of their research stations had simply vanished, along with everyone inside them. The weapon was too powerful, too unpredictable. Even the Builders, with all their knowledge, couldn't control it completely. Reed sat down on a nearby chair, the crystal still projecting its deadly secrets into the air around him. The weapon's design was elegant in its horror. It would create a cascade of dimensional rifts, each one feeding into the next, until they formed a web that could trap and destroy anything caught within it. But the energy required to control these rifts was enormous, and any slight mistake in the calculations could lead to disaster. He thought about his duty to the Galactic Council. They needed to know about this discovery, but he also knew how dangerous this knowledge could be. In the wrong hands, or even in the right hands that were too eager to use it, this weapon could destroy everything they had built. Taking out his official datapad, Reed began to write his report. He chose his words carefully, making sure to emphasize the weapon's flaws and the dangers of its use. The dimensional rift generator, he wrote, while theoretically capable of unprecedented destructive power, presents risks that far outweigh any potential military applications. The energy requirements alone make it impractical for deployment, and the possibility of catastrophic failure cannot be ignored. As he finished his report, Reed looked again at the holographic displays. Something about the design bothered him. The Builders had approached the problem from a specific direction, using the technology they knew best. But what if someone looked at it differently? What if some other species found these plans and saw something the Builders had missed? Reed shook his head, trying to clear away such thoughts. No one would be foolish enough to try to modify this weapon. The council members were wise and cautious. They would read his report and agree that this was best left as a historical curiosity, nothing more. He carefully placed the crystal in a secure container and sealed his report. The archive's automated systems would process it and file it away in the council's records, where it would likely gather digital dust for another 1,000 years. As Reed walked back through the corridors, the lights dimming behind him, he felt relieved. He had done his duty. He had preserved knowledge while also protecting the galaxy from a danger it wasn't ready to handle. The archive sealed itself as he left, its ancient security systems reactivating. Reed's ship waited outside, ready to take him back to the council headquarters. As he prepared for departure, he made one final note in his personal log. Some knowledge is best left in the past. The Builders knew this, and we would be wise to follow their example. Little did Reed know that his careful report, meant to discourage interest in the weapon, would one day catch the attention of a species that saw problems very differently from the rest of the galaxy. A species that had survived and thrived by doing what others thought impossible. But that was still years away, and for now, the weapon's secrets slept quietly in the archives, waiting to be rediscovered. 20 years had passed since Admiral Reed's discovery in the archives. The Galactic Council's central library was quiet except for the soft hum of holographic displays and the occasional footsteps of researchers. Dr. James Miller sat at his desk, surrounded by floating screens filled with alien text. As one of the first human scientists allowed to study the ancient archives, he took his job very seriously. Miller rubbed his tired eyes and reached for his coffee cup, a habit that still made other species in the library look at him strangely. Humans were among the few beings who enjoyed stimulant drinks, just one of many things that made them different from the other council races. A notification flashed on his screen. Another set of archive files had finished translating. Miller had created a program to search through old military records, looking for anything that might help Earth's defense systems catch up with the rest of the galaxy. As he scrolled through the results, one file caught his attention. It was Admiral Reed's report about some kind of ancient weapon. The more Miller read, the straighter he sat in his chair. His coffee grew cold, forgotten, as he studied the weapon designs. The other researchers were packing up for the day, but Miller barely noticed. His mind was racing with possibilities that Reed had never considered. The problem wasn't that the weapon was too powerful. It was that the builders had tried to control it in the wrong way. Miller pulled up data about Earth's magnetic field on another screen. What if they used a planet's natural magnetic field as a stabilizing factor? Earth's field was unusually strong compared to most habitable worlds. That's why humans had developed such good shielding technology early in their space age. Miller started making calculations on a separate device, one not connected to the Council's networks. The numbers looked promising. The builders had tried to contain the dimensional rifts with pure energy, but Earth's magnetic field could act like a net, catching and directing the rifts. It would be like riding a wave instead of trying to stop it. He glanced around the now empty library. Miller knew he should report this to the Council, but years of working with them had taught him how they thought. They would shut down his research before it began. The Council valued stability above all else. They wouldn't understand that sometimes you had to take risks to make progress. Instead, Miller sent a carefully coded message to his old friend at the Earth Defense Research Center. He didn't include any specific details, just enough to suggest he had found something important. Then he started copying the relevant files to his private device, making sure to follow all the proper checkout procedures. On paper, he was just doing routine research on historical weapons development. As Miller walked to the transport station that would take him back to the human quarter, his mind was already working on solutions to problems the builders had never solved. They had tried to control every aspect of the dimensional rifts, but humans had centuries of experience working with chaotic systems. Sometimes the best way to control something was to guide it rather than try to force it. The transport pod hummed to life, carrying Miller through the gleaming towers of the Council city. Below him, members of a dozen different species went about their business, all following the careful, measured pace that the Council preferred. But Earth wasn't like that. Humans had survived and grown strong by adapting quickly, by trying new things when the old ways didn't work. In his small apartment, Miller set up his private lab equipment. He had already designed several experiments that could test his theories without drawing attention. They would look like standard physics research to anyone who checked. As his computers began running simulations, Miller thought about what this could mean for humanity. Earth was still new to the galactic community. Many older species looked down on humans, seeing them as too aggressive, too willing to take chances. But Miller knew that every major breakthrough in history had come from someone willing to try what others thought was impossible. As the first results appeared on his screen, Miller smiled. The Council had been right about one thing. This weapon was incredibly dangerous. But they had been wrong about it being useless. In the right hands, with the right modifications, it could be the most important discovery in human history. All he needed was time to prove it. The emergency alarms woke Miller from his sleep. Red lights flashed across his apartment as the Council's emergency broadcast system activated. He rushed to his viewing screen, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The swarm had finally reached Council space. The live feeds showed their ships, if you could call them ships. They looked more like giant living creatures, dark shapes that moved through space like schools of fish. Their organic hulls absorbed energy weapons and repaired themselves almost instantly. Behind them, they left nothing but empty worlds and stripped colonies. Miller watched as the Council's finest warships fired their weapons. Beams of energy cut through space, hitting the swarm ships directly. But the wounds sealed themselves within seconds. The swarm's response was devastating. They didn't use normal weapons. Their ships simply rammed into the Council vessels, tearing them apart and absorbing the debris to make repairs. The news got worse over the next few days. 3 outer colonies had already fallen. The Council's defensive lines broke one after another. Their best technology, developed over thousands of years of peace, meant nothing against an enemy that could heal itself and learn from every attack. In his hidden lab, Miller worked faster than ever. His experiments with Earth's magnetic field had shown promise, but he needed more time. The simulation suggested his modified version of the builder weapon could work, creating rifts that would completely remove the swarm ships from existence. No debris meant nothing for them to absorb and reuse. A message from Earth's military command flashed on his screen. More colonies had fallen. The swarm was moving faster than anyone had predicted. At their current speed, they would reach Earth's sector in less than 6 months. Miller looked at his latest test results. The small-scale experiments were working, but scaling up the weapon would be dangerous. The Council would never approve it. They were already falling back to their core worlds, preparing for a long defensive war they couldn't win. His private comlink buzzed. Admiral Stone from Earth Defense wanted an update. Miller sent back a simple message: "It's ready for testing." But the Council can't know. The response came quickly: "Come home. Now." Miller packed his research carefully, making sure to cover his tracks in the Council archives. As he boarded the transport ship to Earth, he heard other passengers talking about the war. The swarm had taken another system, but this time something was different. There were no survivors, no distress calls, nothing left at all. The swarm wasn't just conquering worlds anymore. They were consuming them completely. The trip back to Earth took 3 weeks. Miller spent most of it reviewing his data, making sure he hadn't missed anything. The weapon would work, he was sure of it, but the effects might spread beyond just the target area. The dimensional rifts could be unpredictable, just as the builders had warned. Earth looked beautiful from orbit, its blue oceans and white clouds hiding the military buildup happening on the surface. Military ships filled the space around the planet, more than Miller had ever seen before, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. Conventional weapons couldn't stop the swarm. In a secure facility deep under the Rocky Mountains, Miller met with Admiral Stone and Earth's military leadership. He showed them everything: the builder designs, his modifications, the test results, and the risks. "If this works," Miller explained, "the rifts will remove the swarm ships completely. No debris, no chance to regenerate. But if something goes wrong..." He paused, looking at the worried faces around him. "The rifts could spread. We might lose more than just the target area." Admiral Stone stood by the window, looking out at the underground facility where engineers were already building the prototype. "How long until the swarm reaches our first colony?" 4 months, someone answered. "Maybe less." "And how long to build the weapon?" Miller checked his calculations one last time. 3 months, if we rush it. "But the Council..." "The Council," Stone interrupted, "is watching their empire fall apart. They've lost 6 systems in 3 weeks. We can either wait to die, or we can try something they're too afraid to attempt." As Miller watched the engineers begin their work, he realized humanity had reached a turning point. They were about to either save the galaxy or make things much, much worse. But sitting back and doing nothing had never been the human way. Sometimes the biggest risk was not taking one at all. Deep beneath the Martian surface, Miller watched as the test chamber hummed to life. 3 months of non-stop work had led to this moment. The prototype was smaller than the final weapon would be, but it had to work. They were running out of time. The swarm had already taken 2 of Earth's outer colonies. The survivors' reports were nightmare fuel. Entire planets stripped bare in days, with nothing left but empty rocks floating in space. The Council's mighty fleets had been reduced to scattered groups trying to evacuate civilians before the swarm arrived. "Power levels at 60%, called out one of the technicians. The machine in the center of the chamber looked nothing like the builder's original design. It was covered in coils of copper and rare earth magnets, tied into Mars' artificial magnetic field. Miller had redesigned everything based on human technology and understanding. A Council spy drone had spotted their facility 2 weeks ago. The Council's response was immediate and harsh. They demanded Earth shut down the project or face expulsion from the Alliance. But with the swarm less than a month away from Earth's core systems, Admiral Stone had simply ignored their threats. 80% power, the technician announced. The air in the chamber began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Miller checked his readings. The magnetic field was holding steady, channeling the building energy exactly as his calculations had predicted. "Target drone deployed," another technician reported. A small, unmanned ship moved into position at the far end of the chamber. They had built it to match the organic structure of a swarm vessel as closely as possible. "Power at maximum," the first technician said. The shimmering in the air had become more intense. Small arcs of electricity crawled across the weapon's surface, contained by the magnetic field. Miller took a deep breath. "Activate the rift." The weapon fired. There was no beam, no explosion, no sound. Instead, the air seemed to twist, as if reality itself was being folded. A small dark spot appeared in front of the target drone, no bigger than a dinner plate. But as Miller watched, the darkness began to spread, forming web-like patterns in the air. The drone shuddered as the edge of the dark pattern touched it. Then, without any flash or noise, the front half of the drone simply ceased to exist. The cut was perfectly clean, as if that part of reality had never existed at all. "Magnetic field is holding," someone shouted. The dark pattern stayed contained within the test area, exactly as planned. After 30 seconds, Miller gave the order to power down. The rifts closed, leaving behind only the half of the drone, as proof they had existed at all. The chamber erupted in cheers, but Miller barely heard them. He was already reviewing the data, making sure everything had worked exactly as predicted. It had. The weapon didn't just destroy its target. It removed it from existence completely, leaving nothing for the swarm to absorb and reuse. Admiral Stone walked up beside him, looking at the readings. "Will it work against their whole fleet?" Miller nodded slowly. "The full-scale version will create a much larger field of rifts. The swarm's organic ships won't have time to adapt or heal. They'll be gone before they realize what's happening. And the risks? The same as before. If the magnetic containment fails, the rifts could spread. We've never tried anything like this at full scale. We'll be tearing holes in space itself, holes that might not want to close." Before Stone could respond, the emergency alarms blared. A message flashed across all screens. The swarm had just destroyed another colony. They were moving faster now, learning from each encounter. The latest estimates gave Earth 2 weeks at most. "The Council has ordered all their citizens to evacuate Earth's sector," Stone said quietly. "They're abandoning us to save themselves." Miller looked at the half-drone still sitting in the chamber. Maybe they're right. This weapon, we're breaking fundamental laws of physics. The builders themselves thought it was too dangerous to use. Stone turned to face him. "The builders never faced extinction. We do. Sometimes the only choice is between a dangerous gamble and no chance at all." In the chamber below, teams were already preparing for another test. They had less than 2 weeks to scale up the weapon and pray it worked. Humanity's fate would rest on whether Miller's calculations were right, and whether they were brave enough, or desperate enough, to use a weapon that could save or destroy them all. The last transport ships were leaving Earth's orbit as Miller watched the final preparations. The full-scale weapon looked like a massive metal flower, its piddles made of magnetic coils stretching out into space. They had built it in orbit, far enough from Earth to be safe, but close enough to use the planet's magnetic field. The news from the outer colonies got worse every hour. The swarm had changed its tactics, moving faster than ever before. They didn't even bother stripping planets anymore. They just destroyed everything in their path, as if they had learned they were racing against time. "Final power check complete," reported the chief engineer from the control station. They had converted 3 of Earth's largest power plants to feed energy to the weapon. The connecting beams glowed blue against the darkness of space, carrying enough power to run a small country. Miller looked at the test target, an abandoned space station they had towed into position. It wasn't as big as a swarm ship, but it would show them if the weapon could work on a real scale. His hand shook slightly as he checked the calculations one last time. A flash of light caught his attention. Another ship was approaching, but not from Earth. The sleek design marked it as a council vessel. Admiral Stone's voice crackled over the comm system. "Council representatives are demanding we shut down immediately. They're threatening military action." Miller watched the council ship grow larger on his screen. They were afraid, not just of the swarm, but of what humans might do with this weapon if it worked. The council had spent thousands of years building their perfect, orderly galaxy. Now humans were about to either save it or tear it apart. "Proceed with the test," Stone ordered. "We're out of time." The weapon's magnetic coils began to spin, creating a web of invisible force that would guide and control the rifts. Energy readings climbed higher and higher, far beyond anything they had tried in the Mars facility. Miller felt sweat on his forehead, despite the station's cool air. "Energy at maximum," called out the engineer. "Magnetic field is stable, ready to initiate on your command." Miller looked at the final simulation results on his screen. Everything said this would work. Everything said the magnetic field would contain the rifts. But the numbers also showed something else. At this scale, the weapon would create effects they couldn't fully predict. "Council ship is launching warning shots," someone reported. Small flashes of light shot past the weapon platform, deliberately missing but getting closer. They were serious about stopping the test. "Now or never," Stone said quietly. "Make the call, Doctor." Miller took a deep breath. "Activate the weapon." The space around the magnetic coils began to darken. Not like a shadow or a cloud. More like reality itself was being pulled aside like a curtain. The darkness spread in geometric patterns, forming a web of nothingness that grew larger and larger. The abandoned space station shuddered as the rifts reached it. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, silently, pieces of it began to vanish. Not exploding or breaking apart, simply ceasing to exist. Within seconds, half the station was gone, the cuts so clean they looked almost beautiful. "Magnetic field is holding," the engineer shouted. "Containment is working exactly as predicted." The council ship had stopped firing. Miller could imagine their sensors trying to understand what they were seeing. The weapon wasn't just destroying matter. It was removing it from existence itself, leaving behind nothing but empty space where something used to be. After 2 minutes, Miller gave the order to power down. The rifts closed slowly, the darkness fading away until only normal space remained. Where the space station had been, there was nothing. No debris, no radiation, no trace it had ever existed at all. The control room burst into cheers, but Miller kept watching his readings. The magnetic field had worked perfectly, containing the rifts just as he had hoped. But the energy patterns showed something else. Ripples in spacetime spreading out from the test site, too subtle to see but growing larger. The council ship transmitted a final message before jumping away at full speed. They were declaring Earth a rogue state, cutting off all contact and support. Humanity would face the swarm alone. Stone walked up beside Miller, looking at the empty space where the station had been. Will it work against their whole fleet? Yes, Miller said quietly. But these readings, we're affecting space itself. The more we use it, the more unpredictable the effects might become. We might save Earth and still change the universe forever. Better a changed universe than no universe at all, Stone replied. How long until we can fire again? The swarm arrived faster than anyone had predicted. Their ships darkened the space around Pluto, millions of organic vessels moving together like a cloud of locusts. Earth's long-range sensors showed them stripping Pluto's moons bare in hours, absorbing materials to create even more ships. Miller stood in the weapon control station, watching the tactical displays with Admiral Stone. The weapon was ready, its magnetic coils fully charged. But the latest sensor readings made his stomach turn. The ripples in space from their test were still spreading, growing stronger instead of fading away. The swarm has changed course, reported the sensor officer. They're bypassing the outer planets, heading straight for Earth. At their current speed, they'll be in weapon range in 6 hours. Stone walked to the main window, looking at the massive weapon platform floating in space. Earth hung behind it, beautiful and blue. 6 billion people waited below, hoping their gamble would pay off. Dr. Miller, Stone said quietly, I need your honest opinion. Not what you hope will happen, but what you think will happen when we use this at full power. Miller pulled up his latest calculations. The weapon will work. The rifts will destroy the swarm ships completely. But, he paused, looking at the disturbing patterns in his data. The ripples we created in our test are still growing. Using the weapon at full power, against their entire fleet, we might tear a permanent hole in space itself. What does that mean for Earth? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Miller pointed to the readings. We're breaking fundamental laws of physics. The universe might try to fix itself, or it might unravel around the damage we cause. There's no way to predict it. A flash of light caught their attention. The swarm had reached Jupiter, but instead of stopping to consume its moons, they just kept coming. They had learned from the outer colonies, becoming more focused on their target with each attack. Message from the Council, called out the communications officer. On the main screen, the Council's final warning appeared. They had detected the spatial distortions from Earth's test. They warned that using the weapon again could destroy the fabric of space-time itself. The message ended with a simple choice: stand down or be marked as enemies of all life in the galaxy. Stone laughed bitterly. Enemies of all life? In 6 hours there won't be any life left in this system if we don't act. The swarm crossed Jupiter's orbit, their ships now clearly visible even from Earth. They had grown even larger, their organic hulls twisted into new and deadlier shapes. The front of their fleet shot out long tendrils of living metal, ready to tear apart anything in their path. We're receiving transmissions from all Earth governments, the communications officer reported. They're asking for your decision, Admiral. Stone turned to Miller. If we don't use it, we die. If we use it, we might still die, just taking the universe with us. Did I sum it up right? That's about it, Miller nodded. But there might be another option. The readings suggest the spatial damage is worst at the point of impact. If we can draw the swarm to one location, concentrate the effect there, we might contain the damage to one region of space, Stone finished. Create a dead zone instead of destroying everything. It's a theory, but we've been wrong about everything else the weapon could do. This is just another guess. The tactical display blinked red. The swarm had passed Mars' orbit, accelerating toward Earth. Their front ships had split apart, ready to surround the planet from all sides. They had learned from every battle, adapted to every defense, but they had never seen anything like what Earth was about to unleash. Stone walked to the command station, her hand hovering over the weapon controls. Doctor, I'm about to give an order that might save humanity or end the universe. Any last advice?" Miller looked at his homeworld, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The builders who created the weapon but feared to use it, the council who chose safety over survival, and humanity who looked at something impossible and found a way to make it work, even if it might destroy them. "The universe is change," he said finally. "Everything we know about physics, about reality itself, tells us that nothing lasts forever. Maybe it's time for something new." Stone nodded slowly, then pressed her hand to the controls. "Send the signal. Let's show the swarm why they should have stayed away from Earth." The weapon hummed to life one final time, its magnetic coils glowing against the darkness of space. The swarm's fleet filled the view screens, millions of organic ships moving as one massive creature. They had sensed the weapon powering up and were now racing forward, trying to destroy it before it could fire. Miller's fingers flew across the control panel, making final adjustments. The weapon would only get one shot. If they missed, if the magnetic field failed, or if his calculations were wrong, Earth would fall. Behind him, Admiral Stone coordinated with Earth's remaining ships, positioning them to herd the swarm into the target zone. "Energy levels at maximum," called out the chief engineer. "Magnetic containment is holding steady." The weapon's coils spun faster, drawing power from every generator on Earth's surface. The lights in cities across the planet dimmed as they fed their power into humanity's last hope. The first wave of swarm ships launched their attack. Organic missiles splashed against Earth's shields, trying to break through. The weapon wasn't ready yet. They needed another 30 seconds to build up full power. Miller watched the shield strength dropping, praying it would hold. "Now," Stone commanded. Earth's defense fleet sprang into action, their weapons firing in precise patterns. They weren't trying to destroy the swarm ships. They were pushing them, herding them toward a single point in space where the weapon's effect would be strongest. The swarm took the bait, their ships clustering together as they pushed toward what they thought was a weakness in Earth's defenses. They had evolved to be perfect predators, but they had never learned to recognize a trap. "Target zone is filled," reported the tactical officer. 80% of their fleet is in position." Miller looked at his readings one last time. The spatial distortions from their test were still there, growing stronger. What they were about to do would change this region of space forever. But it was that or extinction. "Fire the weapon," Stone ordered. Reality twisted. The space between the magnetic coils darkened, not like a shadow but like a hole in existence itself. The rifts spread outward in geometric patterns, each one feeding into the next. The swarm ships at the edge of the effect tried to turn away, but it was too late. The front of their fleet simply vanished. Not destroyed, not broken apart. They ceased to exist entirely. The rifts spread through their formation like cracks in glass, erasing ships by the thousands. The swarm tried to adapt, their organic hulls changing shape, but there was nothing to adapt to. You couldn't heal from being removed from reality itself. "Magnetic containment is holding," Miller shouted over the sound of straining equipment. "The effect is staying within the target zone." The rifts grew larger, feeding on the energy of the destroyed ships, creating new patterns of darkness. In the command center, alarms blared as sensors detected massive distortions in spacetime. But the magnetic field held, channeling the destruction exactly where they wanted it. After 3 minutes that felt like years, the last swarm ship vanished. The rifts began to close, the darkness fading away. But something was different. Where the swarm had been, space itself had changed. The stars behind that region looked wrong, their light twisted and distorted. "Weapon powering down," the engineer reported. "All systems returning to normal." Miller studied the sensor readings. The rifts had closed, but they had left something behind. A region of space where the laws of physics had been permanently altered. Inside that zone, organic matter couldn't maintain its complex structures. Any living ship that tried to pass through would fall apart at the molecular level. "We did it," Stone whispered. We actually did it. Messages began pouring in from Earth's surface. People had watched through telescopes and cameras as humanity's greatest enemy vanished into nothing. Celebrations broke out across the planet as the news spread. The council ships appeared at the edge of the solar system, probably expecting to find Earth destroyed. Instead, their sensors showed them something unprecedented, a weapon that had not just defeated an unstoppable enemy, but had changed the rules of the universe to make sure they could never return. Miller looked at his homeworld through the station's window, the beautiful blue marble that had given them the key to controlling the weapon. Humans had done what the builders thought impossible, what the council thought too dangerous to try. They had looked into the dark between dimensions and found a way to ride the lightning. Send a message to the council, Stone ordered. Tell them Earth is ready to discuss new terms for our membership, and remind them that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't the weapon you have, but the courage to use it.